Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us from all around the world for this Guesty Virtual Meetup today. We're going to be talking with Tom Goodwin about staying powers, lessons in loyalty and longevity. For those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm David Angotti. I'm Chief Digital Officer at Costco and the former Chief Evangelist right here at Guesty. But today's not about me. It's about my good friend, Tom Goodwin. He's the CEO and owner of Mountain Laurel Chalets. Now, I've said this before, but I don't just bring anybody on these webinars. Everybody I bring on here and put in front of you guys are people that I know, people that I've had a chance to do some life with. And so Tom and I have this story that intertwines all the way back to property management days in 2013 when I was in property management. We didn't know each other well back then, but fast forward and we were sharing a meal actually a few years ago and immediately hit it off with each other. So Tom's one of those people that actually has the door code to my house that has an open invite to stay with us here in Nashville where I live. But there's so much more to Tom's story. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. But I want to give you an idea of how today is going to run. We're going to start with a few opening words. And then from that, we're going to go to a conversation that Tom and I have. Conversation that I believe is going to both be very interesting, but also give you solid takeaways that you'll have at the end of this to apply to your brands. And then following that, we'll go to audience Q&A. So before we dive into all of that, here's some information around Guesty. These numbers are big, almost $500 million in funding. We have all these locations and all these customers, and all of this is interesting. But why should you care about these numbers? Why does $500 million in funding mean anything to you or all these global locations? It's because we're investing all of that back into you. This is how we're able to provide better distribution, AI that's meaningful and useful to your business, uh, better accounting, better operational efficiency. That's why these numbers matter. So, whether you're just getting started with one property or all the way up to an enterprise level or anything in between, we have a solution for you today, but also for you all the way into the future. Today, we're talking about loyalty, staying power, and it's easy to jump straight to strategy and what tools maybe should be used for this or how Tom's done that in his market. But I want to share a story from back when I was managing properties in the Smoky Mountains. We had made it through our first Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving in the Smoky Mountains is about as high as the rates get there and as high as the occupancy gets there. And we just ran ourselves ragged trying to keep these guests happy. We wanted to deliver, what's now called unreasonable hospitality. We were running out there all day long on Thanksgiving Day, just playing whack-a-mole and trying to make sure everybody was having a good time. But what ended up happening was we were short staffed that day due to it being a holiday. We still fell short of guest expectations, and ultimately our staff was exhausted at the end of it. And so the next year rolls around, and we knew we had to do something different. We had exponentially more properties by that time, so knew we would have more problems, and we would have more guests. And so what we decided to do was take a different approach. We went to every single property before the guests arrived. And we put a handwritten note welcoming them to the property. We put a pumpkin pie in there, a turkey roaster, stuffing mix, all of this stuff to make their holiday dinner with. But in that handwritten note, we just simply said that, during the Thanksgiving holiday, we were definitely here for them. We were going to take these few hours, though, where we would not be available unless it was an emergency. And we didn't know how that would be received. But those 5 hours gave our teams time to enjoy Thanksgiving with their family. And what we found out of that was because we had given something to them and given them the boundaries, really, they respected it and they left us more positive reviews, actually, with us keeping those boundaries than without. And so there's a funny thing how we can start to systemize even something like Thanksgiving to work better for the guests and also for us. And so it really kind of goes to this point of culture. Culture isn't what's just happening inside the office or in our team meetings or even out in the properties or in the field. It's how do we make people feel, especially if we're not there in person to make them feel that thing. So that's what today's going to be about. We're going to have this conversation around how loyalty and how happiness in our guests creates these healthy organizations and have the staying power to stay for 5 decades. Yeah, you heard that right. 50 years. Companies like Mountain and Laurel Chalets. So I'm going to bring Tom in now, the CEO and owner of Mountain Laurel Chalets. Welcome, Tom. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, David. Glad to be here. Excited to join with you and see what happens in this next hour.
Yeah, so I want to start out with just talking about how did Mountain Laurel Chalets get started? What's the backstory of where this came from? 50 years ago, there was no Airbnb or Verbo. This was a completely different time.
Yeah, it was 53 years ago, founded in 1972 by my mother and father-in-law. I married into the family, and that is the founders are Dot and Ralph Egley. And in 1972, they had started their family. They lived in Gatlinburg. My mother-in-law was the first kindergarten teacher in Sevier County. My father-in-law was a former chemical engineer in Oak Ridge, and they moved to Gatlinburg, and he became a general contractor and built a lot of the structures in downtown Gatlinburg. And they loved Mount LeConte. They loved hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains, and so they built a home up on Wiley Oakley. Back when there were just a smattering of homes, just a couple dozen, uh, unpaved roads, four-wheel drives required, and they were one of the only year-round residents there. And so they became friends with all the other homeowners who just had these as their personal family vacation homes. Certainly didn't rent them out, didn't want strangers living in their homes. But they were also friends with people in the downtown. The Gatlinburg Inn or the Mountain View Inn would fill up, and Wilma Maples or Pauline Huff would call Dot and Ralph and say, "We have a couple that just showed up and we don't have a room for them. And can you host them in your house?" So my wife and her sister were, 10, 11, 12 years old, and they lived in a four-bedroom house, and their bedroom had two queen beds, an in-suite bath, think 1972, with a sliding door out to the deck. And so they would fix their room, make their bed, and then rent it for about $10 a night to that family. And that's how it began. And then it began to snowball because all these other people that owned these homes would give their keys to Dot and Ralph and say, "Would you look after my house while we're not here? If it freezes, and check the water pipes, just check on the house, like a home stay keeper." And so Dot and Ralph would do that. They were really good neighbors. And then people would come, they'd get snowed in, they use their four-wheel drive, bring them milk and their newspaper and their prescription from the drugstore. And then these people began to die, and they would leave their homes to Dot and Ralph in their will as a first right of purchase. So Dot and Ralph began to buy some other properties. And back then, it was really nice to buy property in the late 60s in Gatlinburg with acreage for about 20 or $30,000. And so, as luck would have it, and as fate would have it, they began to think, well, I think we could make this into a business model, and we could rent these homes while the owners are not there. So that's how it all began. And in July of 1972, they officially opened their business with the first home that they had purchased, and it was called Mountain Laurel House. And it was just a rental management company with one property, and it rented for $12 a night, a three-bedroom, two-bath. And I still have the receipt and the reservation on the spreadsheet for that home and in the spiral notebook.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about people deeding first right of refusal in their will to your family. And so people, connection, trust, these are ideas that are central to property management still today in 2025. But it doesn't get any stronger on those three elements than somebody deeding a property to you or a right of refusal on a property to you in the will. Can you just talk through people, connection, and trust and how that's kind of flowed through the business over the years?
Yeah, I think trust is our foundation in our relationships and our reputation with our owners and with our guests and within the community. And I have simply taken on the mantle of responsibility to continue the legacy that Mountain Laurel already had when I came into the operation. And my burden is to continue that level of trust, personal care, connection with our owners, with our guests, with our employees, and with the people within the community. So it is central to all that we do.
Yeah, and I saw that firsthand. I think it's been 3 years ago that I came out there, and Tom once a year does an owners meeting. And this would have been terrifying to me as a property manager. He gets all of his property owners in one room, huge, like beautiful room, served them dinner, had entertainment for them, speeches for them, different things. But then even invited the surrounding community as well, the people that you don't manage homes for, put them all in the same room where they could share information with each other. So if somebody was unhappy with Tom, everybody at the table would have known. But that's part of trust, right? You're willing to put everybody together. You're willing to speak to them and proactively communicate about challenges as well as successes, right?
Well, if the relationship begins with trust and there's transparency, then there should be nothing to hide, and it should be something to celebrate and to share. So I'm not a person that thinks of scarcity. I think more of abundance, and sharing our story and having our owners share the story is a powerful thing. But it wouldn't be powerful if I was deceptive, if I was untrustworthy, if I was conniving, if I was using owners. And you see that a lot. That business is first and looking out for self, but we have a culture of looking out for others before ourselves. Of course, we want to be profitable, we want to be prudent, we want to have a good business model, but caring for other people is essential and it's foundational to everything we believe.
So let's rewind back to 2012. I think that was the year you got involved with the brand in a meaningful way. What drew you into the brand, and how did this all come about? How did Tom end up here?
Well, we were 40, the business was 40 years, celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2012. And that was on the heels of the recession. And we were in a space that we finally came to realize in 2012, we need to get some financial things in order, and we need to have a little bit more control over the future of Mount Laurel to preserve this legacy. So the three children, who up to that point were part owners, mostly just for legal reasons, but we never really spoke into the business because, especially as a son-in-law, I didn't want to presume of my in-laws. And so we were very passive in our ownership, my wife and her sister and brother. But in 2012, we began to really take some more responsibility. My in-laws were moving into their older years. They were in their 80s. And we're like, okay, we need to begin thinking about the future. So in 2012, an event happened when we kind of saw behind the curtain of all the financials, and it wasn't good news. And the current leadership that my in-laws were entrusting to lead the business were really hoping that the economy would just turn around, and it didn't. So we had to step in, and the family said, okay, we want to take ownership. And among the six of us, the three children and their spouses, they all said, Tom, we think you have the most experience to lead this. And my experience was in nonprofit religious work. It was at a national level, but I did do operations, I did do conferences, and I did do brand. So I did events and hospitality. I organized people in leadership, and I worked on brand. And all of that has segued very well into Mount Laurel and the season that we were in at the 40th anniversary, when we really needed to think, what's the next 40 years going to look like? And so that really informed a lot of the initial decisions of how to secure the business and to move forward for the next 40 years.
So that's fascinating. You moved from the nonprofit world, which you actually worked with a family member of mine at that nonprofit, and then you moved into the for-profit world. So I'm sure there's some adjustment there. What were some of the first decisions you started making as you moved into the brand, where you were just like a little bit of oh, I hope this works. I'm not sure what I got myself into.
My first morning, it was June 27th in 2012. The current general manager was released and he left, and I took over running the organization. And I asked our staff member, Kay King, who I think at that point had been with us for 23 years. I said, okay, what did he do on a day-to-day basis? She says, I have no idea. I don't know. There's no systems. So I thought, okay, I'll just go figure this out. And the first thing I did was interview all 20 employees and say and determine who is my go forward team, who's with us or who's against us, and let's pare this down to the people that want to move forward. And then the next big thing I did was I was sitting on this gold mine of a brand that wasn't developed. It was a little haphazard, and it didn't have the skin around it or the language or the tone and intentionality. And therefore, you can't then pass that on to your guests or your employees. Who are we? Why are we here? What's our vision? What are our values? So I invested, with the blessing of the family, a significant amount of money to have a consultant come in and help us with brand development. We did quantitative and qualitative research on all of our guests, former owners, current owners, employees, and mined the story and the core values, and then created a visual brand that reflected those core values. And our messaging guide, our color guide, our tone, our voice, all of those elements. And I said, okay, this encapsulates all that these 40 years of this family brand, this family values represents. And now we have a baseline foundation of which from which we can grow. And I was really nervous spending money when we weren't making money. And then we also took 19 of our properties and took out a $500,000 loan and renovated all 19 of those properties. Now, that doesn't go very far with 19, but we did the HGTV makeover, and that began a whole new process. We thought we want our own personal homes to be reflective of this new brand. And honestly, our homes were some of the worst ones on the program. And so we needed to really invest in those. Some of those homes tripled in their revenue by putting the money, and all of them made their money back, and then began to share that story with other owners and do a lot of renovations of other homes. And slowly but surely, we refined who we were as Mountain Laurel. We had 160 properties at the time. Within 6 months, we went down to 120. I fired 40.
Uh,
Mostly owners who were not willing to make improvements or come under a core brand. And there were employee processes, systems, technology, financials, reporting, accountability, all those things needed to be put into place.
so when you did that research on the brand as you came into the brand, were there any surprises? What was the most surprising thing you found out, or the most interesting thing about the brand that you didn't know that that research process helped you discover?
Well, we discovered that we were greatly loved and we were a part of people's families. And I think you brought it up. My in-laws were in their deeds. Their deeds were given in their wills from other people. And that same loyalty and connectivity existed within our guests and our owners and within the community, the relationships that we had. So my biggest surprise resulted in our first core value. It wasn't a surprise, really, but it was a realization that this is fundamentally who we are. And the first core value we have is that we believe that family matters. And family with our guests, family with our owners, family with our employees, family in our community with all of our vendors. You know, our HVAC company, our electric company, we've been working with them for 40 years up to that point. And we didn't realize they're putting us to the top of their to-do list when a call comes in. That's a huge benefit when you've got 20,000 other cabin owners that are trying to operate remotely, and something breaks down and they call that the local supplier, and they get put just in the calendar. But when we call them, they push us right up to the top because we paid on time, we treated them humanely, we paid them well, and we knew them. We had a relational connection with them. So I think the core essence of family really surprised me, and it still surprises me to this day that our guests are fiercely loyal and generationally loyal. Two, three
Mm.
generations down the line, grandchildren that came here now are bringing their grandchildren. And there's a sense of we're a part of their family. And that's something really to steward. And I thought, this is right in my wheelhouse of faith and family. And how do we capitalize on this? And how do we really accentuate that we are a family owned local company caring for families?
So I think if you're watching today and you're looking for takeaways, because some of these are feel-good stories, and then some of these just feel just insurmountable. I can't operate a brand today that started 50 years ago. That's just not possible. But when you listen to Tom talk, there's just been some nuggets in here, and I'm going to stop a few times as we're going and pull these out for the audience. The Family Matters idea matters to a guest that's booking because of the things like he was just saying. That's a unique value proposition. If you're local in a market and know the HVAC company, and you're in a market where there's 3,000 total residents and 20,000 homes. And so that's the piece that may be getting missed if you're an urban short-term rental manager, for example, that doesn't understand why is that even a value? Well, the value is you could have an HVAC unit that's completely out of service, and it could take a week, 2 weeks to get to that in season if you're in Gatlinburg and don't have these relationships. So what the idea here though is as you're doing that research, that whether you hire a firm to do qualitative, quantitative research on your customers, or if it's earlier and it's brainstorming as a team, what are those things that set us apart? You want to identify these unique value propositions. Otherwise, you're just a commoditized product. A unique value proposition allows you to get a delta or a higher amount than the product will get. And so I do think that that's huge. And I think interviewing employees, which was another thing you said, Tom, is so smart. So if you're acquiring a company, talk to a lot of people that are acquiring companies. Interview all those employees, and it doesn't have to be in a way that makes them feel small or like their job's on the line. It can be taking them out to lunch. Hey, tell me about your history here. Tell me about what you work on each day. I want to understand, and approach it from that mindset of learning. And what you'll end up doing is learning the business end to end if you've just acquired a new one. And along the way, you will learn the ones that are the high performers versus the lower performers as well, of course. But that's how you can, like on a new business that you've just purchased, start to really figure out, okay, what are the core values here, even if they aren't being marketed well. So I think that's all, fantastic advice there, Tom, that was embedded in some of those stories. I did want to talk about the booking trends that have changed along the way since you've been involved, because in 2012, we were kind of at the beginning of online bookings and Airbnb then. You're building this brand, a direct brand, a direct to consumer brand. Can you talk me through how your thinking's maybe evolved on this, as well as like what a booking makeup looks like for a brand like yours, that type of thing?
Well, we've gone from receiving checks on the day of arrival in 2012, and we had only received American Express credit cards because my mother-in-law was convinced that having a Visa or a MasterCard would put people into debt unnecessarily. So American Express required a full payoff. So we only accepted one credit card, and most of our transactions were by check through mail. All of our reservations were by phone, and maybe 15% were online at that point. Um, and so, a lot of our guests are repeat, and they still want to call and make their reservation because they want to talk to Pam or Kelly or Chris or Kay, the person that, that has a relationship with them. But, we've obviously transitioned and caught up. Even in 2012, we didn't have any cleaning fees. We had no additional fees whatsoever. And it was one rate. And it's interesting how now the swing is going back to one rate, no additional fees and so forth. You absorb all of that within it. I'm trying to think, when the business started, it was a tackle box with cash. In 2012, there was it was Excel spreadsheets, and we integrated a lot of technology and kept changing. We've been through a lot of iterations of different PMSs, had some fails and some quick wins, but we've used technology to move towards 50% required at deposit at reservation. If you're a family first member, stay with us 5 or more times, which represents about 2,500 families. They only have to pay for one night to book, to block their house and to keep the reservation. But yeah, there's been a lot of iterations and changes. We didn't have Airbnb. We were one of the first ones with VRBO, with Expedia Group. But majority of our bookings, all of our bookings were direct bookings in 2012, except for a few a small percentage of VRBO. And we didn't start Airbnb bookings listing on Airbnb until 2012 or 20, I'm sorry, 2024. So we were late to the game. I was a holdout a little bit because we had such a high direct booking, 85% direct booking, and then I realized I would rather go down to about a two-thirds direct booking so that I have a billboard effect on the different OTAs and then draw those people in for repeat guests further. So we're at about a 70% direct booking now, which I'm really pleased with, and 30% on OTAs.
So you won't hear people say that very often. Like I was at this higher direct booking, I wanted to actually dial that back some. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that because the direct booking percentage as a standalone stat is a vanity stat. And I always joke, I've got the secret to be 100% direct booking tomorrow. And like, I'll do this sometimes when I'm speaking to an audience. And how many of you want the secret? They'll raise their hands and it's like, just set your rates at $1 a night. Well, if you set the rates at $1 a night, you'll have long-term rentals, you'll have homeless people in the properties, but you'll be 100% occupied direct. And so, it's obviously a silly example to drive home this idea that the direct booking is one very important stat. And so I do believe it's an important stat, but not a standalone stat. You also have to look at ADR. What's the impact of now distributing through some additional channels on your ADR, your occupancy overall, not just your occupancy that's driven by direct bookings, and all of these other factors as well. So I think that there's quite a bit of wisdom in saying if I'm 85% direct, that's a lot of eggs in that one basket too. And I'd like to diversify a little bit. But I do want to come back to family first. You talked about family first, this idea of people book with you 5 times, they start to get advantages. That really speaks to how loyal people are to Mountain Laurel, because in your market, which I know extremely well, this is not a market with 5 property managers there. This is a market with hundreds of property managers and operators in the market. So to get a guest coming back over and over again, staying with your company, that requires skill to build that loyalty. Can you maybe discuss how you build that culture of loyalty with your customers?
Yeah, well, we first had to identify that we had a large number of guests that were repeat. And so we just began to systematically go through our PMS. And also, as the guests would come in, we'd ask them about their former stays. And they would love to talk about it. We have a map that we hand out to every guest, and it gives them, because there's mountain roads, it's a lot of curves. Before GPS, we have an old hand drawn map. We still use it and we highlight where they get to their cabin, but we also provide them GPS directions and step by step turns and so forth. But we have guests that bring their map from 1978 and highlight all the houses that they've stayed at. And
That
then
is
the map has
amazing.
evolved, obviously, because we have new homes and we've lost some homes and different names and so forth. But the map is really a part of the story. And those guests love to come back and recount all their memories of that they've had in Gatlinburg, which I have to say, being in Gatlinburg is an amazing advantage because there's so much history, there's so much loyalty, there's so much lore around this community in the Great Smoky Mountains. And we just happen to be, my in-laws happened to, this is where they landed. And now after 53 years, they share in the lore and the legacy and that privilege. But we do have over 2,500 families that are part of the Family First program. They've stayed 5 or more times. Many have stayed well over 30 or 40 times with us. Some come 3, 4 times a year. In the Family First program, it's mostly just a name distinction. They've achieved the status of being Family First. So when they arrive, they get a free gift and they get to choose out, or we have to keep doing new merch, new t-shirts. And we've done, the sun is getting kind of bright here. Anyhow, we do different merch and we've done different Gatlinburg things and Smoky Mountain things, but they all want Mountain Laurel. And all of the gifting people say, don't put your brand. That's not what people want. Well, our audience is telling us, no, we want to let people know about the Mountain Laurel brand. They're advocates for us and they're spokespeople. And so our t-shirts with the Mountain Laurel brand, our hats with the Mountain Laurel brand, our coffee cups with the Mountain Laurel brand are the first things that go to the Family First guest. And then they'll buy another one to give to, someone else. They get one per visit. And some people say, well, I've got 20 t-shirts in my drawer. I need a different t-shirt. I need a new t-shirt. So we're always thinking of new gifts. But this is a price point of a gift. We work it into the budget for marketing because a repeat guest is worth great value. They treat the homes really well. They care about their reputation. The cleaners love our repeat guests because the homes are ready. You don't have to pick up the homes. The towels are put in a stack, the sheets are put in a stack, the dishwasher has been run. We don't even have to tell the guests to do that because they really care about their reputation and how they leave the home. And so we gift them, we put them in a new category, we give them a special title. They only have to put one night down to book the house a year in advance. They get some free firewood for every night of their stay. Small little perks. And they also are the first ones to find out about new releases, new homes, and new specials that we would have on our email list. But there is a sense of they've attained the badge of Family First, and there's a sense of pride with that. And it's an amazing quality. We started that in 2012. That was one of the first things that we did was to gather these families, and it passes down through the family. So second, third generation receive the benefits of Family First if it was their grandparents that were a part of that.
That's so cool. Loyalty programs in general will typically boil down to three elements, and you just named them all and through stories. But for anybody that's trying to build a loyalty program, boils down to the reputation of the brand that the consumer is doing business with, because nobody wants to build loyalty to a brand they hate. And so you have to be a brand that's worthy of loyalty to start with. So that's the first key. And then
Mhm.
from there, recognition. Anybody that's checked in at a at a Marriott or a Hilton that has status knows what this is like. Hey, we want to thank you for being a diamond member. And they'll say that, and then it's rewards. And so it's always those like three R's really: reputation, recognition, rewards. And the rewards don't have to be like oversized, grandiose things. They can be the little things like free firewood that probably doesn't cost you that much relative to the cost of the transaction or a coffee mug. And I absolutely agree with you. People love the branded merch. We saw that with SmokyMountains.com out in your same market. And you look angelic there,
There,
Tom. Um,
no, the sun was just being too bright, so I'll turn it
yeah,
this way.
yeah,
Sorry.
man. Like I have a Yeti from your brand, and I use it regularly, and it just makes me happy when I use it, and
Yeah.
it brings back the memories of staying in one of your properties there. And so I definitely think that there's an aspect of just that like that branding driving future reservations. Um,
Yeah. I would
yeah.
agree. I would
So
agree, and I think we just listen to our guests and what do they like, what do they want, and we were trying to think. Let's just do some general, generic Gatlinburg type merch. We
yeah.
can get that anywhere, but we can't get Mount Laurel merchandise. This is the only place we can get it.
We used to, even with our owners at Christmas time, we'd create merchandised gift baskets basically that we'd send out at Christmas, and we worked with a company to make branded peanut brittle and branded granola that was like organic granola and coffee and all of this, and we'd put it in one basket and send it to them, and people loved that just from a perspective of the tie-ins back to the brand. Okay, I'm gonna totally shift gears here from like, hey, this soft touch brand and how to build loyalty into technology and how has technology changed since you've been there? Um, Specifically, what are you guys starting to embrace and adopt today around AI or new tools that would have been like a dream back in 2012 when you joined, or for sure when this started over 50 years ago?
Yeah, well, you could have asked me that question 6 weeks ago, and my answer would be different because, as you say, the iteration, the turnaround of AI is so rapid. It's just amazing. I was listening to a podcast this morning where, I'm looking into personalized video greetings for all of our guests. We do that manually through an app called BombBomb, but we have to do that repeatedly for every guest live. We greet them by name. We say we're looking forward to them staying in such and such a house. If you have any questions, so it's a video connection. But now I was like, okay, how do I take my front desk workers, myself, different employees, and do a AI simulation video within the house, welcoming the guest by name and giving them a greeting and a welcome. So those are some of the small things. And then just having a bank of all your data and information on details of the homes, how to use the televisions. That's our biggest hookup or hang up with our older guests is they don't know how to click on the source and how to watch live TV. And, with YouTube TV dropping college football, it was a disaster just 2 weeks ago. So technology can also be your greatest enemy sometimes. But we try to always think and always learn, always stay ahead of the curve and looking for different ways that we can use AI. I use AI for simple things from all of our Google reviews and responses. I then create personal letters thanking our 5-star reviews that left responses on Google. I inform AI what my tone is, what our brand is, what our messaging is, what our core values, and I want that integrated on every third review response. And so they're not all the same. And then I approve those and those get listed and handing that down to other employees to be able to do that same thing. So it's a lot of using AI is setting it up, it's informing it, and then letting it run. But don't let it run without checking, checking to make sure. And what we did get a little burned with some after hours offshore phone servicing that we used. And we have a lot of bears in Gatlinburg, and bears get into cars, and bears like food. And so we tell all of our guests you have to lock your car doors because they know how to open your car door and they'll go in. So a guest called the after hours number, the agent in overseas picked it up and he told them there's a bear in my car. What do I do? And this offshore person didn't know this culture, didn't know that this was what this was or really what a bear was. So she asked if the bear had a name.
Oh, no.
We got the recording, and I thought this is when technology or offshoring or AI goes bad. So it's all a
Oh,
matter of how do
no.
you inform and how do you give them the right information. So we thought maybe that's not so good, or a guest is calling and they're expecting to talk to someone locally from Gatlinburg with a southern accent, and they're hearing someone else, and it throws them off. And then they think, oh, you sold out. You're now part of the big corporation. You're not the local family owned business. So your tone, your voice, your messaging, we don't want to lose all those things, but we do want to move forward and advance with technology. And what is the balance and how do we adjust and move forward on that? So I'd say we're always learning, David. I learned a lot from you. I'm always consuming content and information, and always curious and still learning. And every 6 weeks, there's a new iteration of what we want to do with technology and especially with AI.
Yeah, it's a constant and delicate balance between the efficiency that AI can provide and the authenticity that we give up, it feels like. And so how we find that balance is definitely a bit different market by market, as well as, based on the brand history that you may be gambling with. In some of these cases, if you have these family first 2,500 families, the last thing you want to do is let them down where they speak to an AI model and then they're like, well, that's not the name of the person I'm used to talking to down at the office, and they'll see right through it. That's the danger of having these really good relationships with people. They'll see through stuff in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and I think, gosh, I sometimes I wish we were brand new and that it didn't matter. But because we have these legacy guests, these repeat guests, it really does matter. And so we need to be looking. See if I Do you still see me, David?
Oh yeah, I see you
Okay,
just
good.
fine.
We need to always be utilizing technology, but through the lens of our market. And our market is different than every other market. Everyone is unique. So we need to be asking the questions, not only our market, but our brand and our company, our core values. Will this work with us? And I'm one that see a squirrel and new object, new shiny object, and run right for it and really enjoy that. But I have been burned by that sometimes too, because I bought into technology that's not right for our brand, not right for our market, not right for our consumer. And my staff will quickly remind me, and they'll listening to them is helpful. So sometimes I live in a different level where I'm getting more exposure to technology and what other people are doing, and being more progressive. That's might not be the best solution for who we are as a company.
And I want to stop here and say there's one of those embedded nuggets of wisdom that I want to pull out in case any of the audience members just missed it. Get your staff's buy-in on technology you will use. I don't care if you're switching
Absolutely.
PMSs, switching another tool that you're going to use in operations, an accounting tool, whatever it is, make sure the people that will be using that tool on a daily basis are excited about the transition. There are always some headaches as you transition between tools. That's just a natural part of that move. And so make sure they're excited about it because they're the ones that have to deal with the headaches. And I think that I'm just going to keep pulling out these bits of wisdom that you're saying and you're just going through them so fast. I'm afraid people may be missing them, but there is so much wisdom in that. Otherwise, you will fail during that transition between tools and you'll have grumpy employees that are like, I can't believe Tom switched this tool. So
Did you read my journal this morning or this last
no.
year? Because I've made that same mistake. So I'm learning that and leaning into our frontline staff. As the owner of the company, I don't really engage in all of the day-to-day details and fine-tuning of the business and what it takes to run it on an ongoing basis. I'm thinking of the future, which our company needs. We need to be thinking fiscally and towards the future and a vision and how do we adapt and change. But I can get really excited about a new idea and concept because I heard it at a conference, or I have a friend that has exposure, or I've seen it work. But if our front desk workers don't buy in, uh, it's it's a fail. It will be a failed launch. And so engaging them, informing them, and really listening to them. So we are looking at some new technology now, and I said, okay, you can talk to me about this, but who you really need to win over are my frontline staff. And so that will mean that you need to come to our location to model this, to share this, and win them over. Because when I've made those decisions apart from them, it's kind of come back to burn me.
So, this is a cyclical industry. We've seen ups and downs since 2012 when you joined, certainly in the 50 plus years that Mountain Laurel has been around. You even mentioned how when you took it over, it was in financial hardship because they kept waiting on the economy to turn. What lessons have you learned about these slowdowns and then these rapid expansion periods that maybe you could share with somebody that's worried the economy might slow down? I talk to property managers sometimes and they're like, hey, we're worried. What if there's a slowdown again? Or what if there's another COVID type event? How do you navigate that? And what would you share with those people?
Well, I think a principle that we try to hold to and don't always hold to is don't presume on the future and don't presume, especially the most recent past, people presuming on 2022 and 2023 income to carry us on into the future. Right now, it's 2025, and we're kind of back to 2019 rates and revenue and the market. The more challenging thing with that is that we've increased the properties in our county about 33%. So you've gone from 24,000 to some say up to 33,000 uh, houses, condos, rentable properties. And so don't ever presume. When you do your forecasting and you're projecting, always do it in the worst case scenario. Always be more conservative. We had fires in our market, as you're very well aware, in 2016. I think we may have been one of the most hardest hit management companies. We lost 50% of our business in 2 hours through the fires. And so we went from managing 96 properties down to 48. And we didn't presume on the future because all of our money was in escrow. All of our future bookings were in escrow. We had never spent any of our future bookings. And that wasn't the case with a lot of our friends in the market as well, who had already spent those future bookings. They didn't keep the money in the escrow, and people now wanted refunds because these homes didn't exist anymore. If we had done that, we would have been completely out of business with 50% of our homes being gone, and then virtually for 3 months, no one wanted to come to Gatlinburg. And even then, it was a slow, steady climb back up. So I would say the principle to follow is do not presume on the future, go conservative. And I think also with this, David, is do the kind, good thing and don't presume on the future for your owners either. Don't overestimate what they're going to be earning. I can't every week I get calls from owners who said, "Well, I was told my property would gross 95,000. And this was a home that used to be on our program." And I said, "Well, that's funny because it never went over 70,000 on our program." And they said, "Well, we got 50,000 this year." But they promised them and said 95. So it's just that's not playing the long game. That's just do whatever it takes to get the contract, to get the owner, overpromise, and let the realtors do that, which they do that all the time. They said this is what the house is going to produce in income. But as a professional vacation rental manager, do the kind thing and be conservative with your estimates and tell your owners that. And then also reflect that within also your business values and your fiscal responsibility looking towards the future.
Play the long game, especially when it comes to your owners. You want stable owners on your platform. I'll give you an example of this that's maybe a takeaway for the audience. We're looking at buying another vacation rental in another market, and we're going to use a property manager for it. So we spoke to several, and they projected all these different numbers, which is what typically happens. And of course, I have access to Guesty data, Price Labs data, or, Wheelhouse data, all of these different data tools. So I kind of know what it's going to do. Is the funny thing. They don't know that I know that. And I'm talking with the one property manager who we will probably go with. And what he told me was, look, you're going to get a lot of numbers from a lot of different people. I don't think most people will do this. I'm going to break it down by season and into 15 seasons, how many nights you can expect us to rent for you, and the amount of revenue you can expect to earn in each of these seasons. You don't have to wait till the end of a year to see did we miss or did we make it? And I'm not putting you on a long-term contract either. And he wasn't the highest projection by any means, but he was pretty accurate with the tools I was seeing. And that's somebody that knows their numbers and they're willing to project basically a realistic number and play the long game. Because if you sign somebody and you've given them these inflated numbers, they're just going to churn out. It may take them a year or two, but it's going to create a brand reputation issue. That goes back to loyalty, even on the customer side, as you start to lose the properties and a customer wants to come back to that property hits all of those different areas of basically your growth formula. So I love that. Play the long game, play it with your owners, play it with your guests, and play that long game. Um, as we think more optimistically than the ups and downs and cyclical moves of the market, what are you optimistic about for short-term rentals in 2026 and beyond?
Well, I'm optimistic for the opportunity we have to engage with the human element of the family and vacations and that guest experience. Um, I I think that we are those of us that are on the local ground in the towns, in the cities, have teams that have longevity within the cities, have a great opportunity to deliver a very heartfelt human experience that people are longing for. Um, the key is we need to tell that story. We need to share that story and have our guests share that story as well. Because it's not just a transaction, it's just not a financial transaction. And I think the opportunity lies into the hand to hand, the touch, the human experiences that really outlast just an Instagram moment or a great reel or something that just blows up. So you see so many newcomers to the space who are unbelievable with social media. They're fantastic, but they don't have the foundational structure of professionalism, clean homes, servicing, response. That's the bottom line. You've got to create that bottom line before then you add on the icing and the frosting and the sizzle to the steak. But if the steak isn't there, it's going to show. So this is where the opportunity is for us as vacation rental managers locally to provide great steak, to provide a great base, so that we can add on to that with this exceptional guest experience. I also think that you mentioned the churn. There's just the hype, the excitement of COVID and the attraction, more and more people coming to vacation rentals. And I think maybe the trend might be dipping down a little bit now because people overpromised and underdelivered. Now in 2026, what I say to our team is let's just continue to do what we do. We deliver exceptional guest experiences, clean homes, um, great transactions with our owners, transparency. Let's stay the course and move in that direction. And I think all the ones that had the the sparkler's out. The sparkle is like that 4th of July. The sparkler only lasts so long and then it's fizzled. I think there's going to be some fizzle in some of the people that looked really good and had great opportunities because they didn't commit to what the long-term game is, which isn't really sexy. It's not a lot of fun. There's not a lot of Instagrammable moments in cleaning toilets and cleaning out drains and sewer lines and fixing smells in houses and all the stuff behind the scenes. It's not glamorous. But if you don't have those basics, then you don't have the opportunity to deliver on top of that.
So you're my third guest in a row to bring this up. Jeremy Gall, Breezeway, he brought this up. We were talking about just this idea of like you have to there's table stakes to even play in this game, and the door code has to work, and all these things have to be in place for the guest to have a stay. And if you don't have that right, doesn't matter if there's a handwritten note on the counter and they're locked out. They're just going
Yeah.
to be ticked off when they finally get in. And then Matt Durrett was my last guest last month, and he brought up something similar about just the operations. And if you don't have operations right, you don't have a platform to grow upon. And he was talking about just how he'd scaled his business. Now you're saying the same thing. Back when I was in property management, I called it the 95% rule. And I would tell each team member when they started that all of the companies get 95% right. And all of these things are right. It's those details, the last 5% that set the truly great operators apart from the rest, the ones that will be able to command higher rates. And that's what gives you, in my mind, the permission to then even start really marketing it. Because you shouldn't feel good about marketing a product that's below average. That should not feel good to anybody. You should feel good when you're marketing an above average or an excellent product, and that takes work to create.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, on the legacy front, you've got this company with all kinds of legacy. How do you entrust that legacy to vendors and team members? How do you decide, okay, I'm willing to do business with this company, whether that's an HVAC company or a technology partner, knowing that you're somewhat putting your reputation on the line with each vendor you work with?
Yeah, I think part of that is we're really clear who we are and what we offer and our brand standard. I mentioned that we believe that family matters being our first core value. Our second core value is that we believe in exceeding expectations, and our third one is that we believe we're generous stewards. So we're stewarding other people's resources, and we want them to have a greater return on the resource. I'm stewarding my employees. I want them to leave better than they came. And so when you meet with a vendor or even an owner, you can discover in the conversation what their core values are, how they respond to you, how they respond to what your brand standard is, what their reputation is, what their questions are. So I even think just with vendors is equally as important with owners. We don't take on owners that don't match up with our core values and that have unrealistic expectations or different expectations than we can deliver. I would much rather them know exactly what your goals are, what your objectives are, your care of the home, and our niche is really a owner who really cares about their home, wants it to be preserved, wants to keep their legacy, and they're not looking just for heads on beds. They're not just looking for revenue, though we do obviously want to deliver that as well. But with our vendors as well, we look for who are our trusted partners that we can join hands with and trust them to show up. And they do, from the septic company, Milks Septic, who are fabulous people and talk about a thankless job to clean out septic tanks. But they're family owned, they're local, and they have delivered to us. So many other of those companies have a long standing tradition, which we've benefited from. Even the local donut shop, the Donut Fryer, nationally known. Let's give it some. It's been in business for 55 years. And my wife grew up with their family, going to grade school with them and so forth. But you know what they stand for, what their values are, what their quality is. We have that benefit because of longevity within the industry. But I do think you really need to choose your partners well. And it needs to come back to the first thing we discussed. Can I trust them? And do they trust me? Is there suspicion here? Is there going to be reciprocal trust in that relationship? And that's key.
The donut fryer. I'm going to take us on a rabbit trail here, and then we're going to wrap up. But I used to take my daughter Elise there every single year on her birthday. It was our tradition, and the people at the store started actually remembering the son, I think it was, of the owner that was managing the store, and he started putting a candle in the donut for her on her birthday, and she would just
Oh,
light up. Here she was, 7 years old. They're making a big deal out of her birthday, and then they gave her more to go, like that they didn't charge us for, and like, have a good rest of your birthday. And it was that kind of hospitality that has kept the donut fryer there going in business, because now we're telling that story on this webinar. We're going back to the donut fryer when we're in town. So I think that, it's funny to see the parallels as hospitality in the restaurant business or short-term rentals or all these different uh, businesses. They're really just pulling on people's emotions at the end of the day. How do you make somebody feel? So we're kind of back to that starting point. And I want to ask you one last softball question before we close out. If you had three tips that would guarantee your brand to be successful for another 50 years, what would those three tips be?
I would say the first one is to always be curious, continue learning. Don't feel like you've arrived. So that sense of curiosity drives me personally, and it helps our brand evolve and not become stale. Because there could be some great benefits of being in the industry for 53 years, but some people might look at a 53-year-old brand and say, "Oh, it's a has-been. They're not up with the current things. They're not the new up and comers." So take the best of the historical equity that you have and always remain curious and always keep learning. Um, I hope that we would remain true to our three core values of family, exceeding expectations, and being generous stewards. That would really we would embrace that fully, and that would last another 50 years and keep us true to who we are. And I think another element is never lose touch with your guests. Never lose touch with your guests and understanding their stories. I last night, in preparation for this, I called a guest who stayed with us 2 weeks ago. I was talking with him in the lobby at the office. Butch Baltimore from Franklin, Tennessee, first came to stay at Mount Laurel Chalets in 1976 and is still coming back. He's 81 next year.
Oh,
He's already booked his house
wow.
for next fall. And
Amazing.
I think always stay in touch with the human connection of who your guest is and who you're serving. And we have journeyed with Butch through his whole life. And I questioned him on the phone last night, said, "Butch, what really stands out to you?" He started naming former employees, my mother-in-law, my aunt, who have all passed away, like they were his closest friends. And we are still carrying that legacy on. And so I hope in 40 years, someone, maybe, a grandchild that's coming to visit now is bringing their grandchildren saying, "I remember Tom, being behind the desk, or Kelly, or Kay, or Pam, or Chris." And they really made me feel like a part of the family. So that would be my third thing, is never forget your guest, the end user.
Tom, thank you for coming on today. This has been a huge pleasure having you here, and I appreciate your time, and I know our audience does as well. For you out there, we do have our owner's guide, our guide to keeping your owners happy. That's some of what we were talking about today with Tom, and so feel free to snap that and download that guide. Tom, thank you again for coming. Thank you to the audience. Here's how you can reach us if you have questions for us. And we appreciate everyone's time today, especially yours, Tom.
Thank you so much, David.